That's a great link. Philip has to leave at 7:15, so I'm going to quickly move on to the two other speakers.
Because I've got to go to Rural Energy to make a speech.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'd like to go over to Mrs. Lena Kolarska-Bobinska as an MEP. What does the possibility of unconventional gas mean for a country like Poland, both economically and in terms of security of supply?
Thank you very much. You mentioned that there are many questions concerning all sources of energy, so that, for example, shale gas and unconventional sources of gas raise the same type of questions like any other. I think that with shale gas and other unconventional sources, there are more questions than answers right now. We don't know really how big are the resources. We can only expect very vaguely. We don't know how much it will cost the extraction, if it will be economically visible. And I think there are many questions unanswered today. And because there are so many unknown issues, this question of shale gas has become part of enormous, incredible hopes in some countries. It's like really golden rush of 21st century. There are hopes connected with it, economic hopes for changing certain very poor regions. I come from Lublin, Lubelskie region. I mean, I was elected from Lubelskie region, which is a quite traditional farmland peasant region, one of the poorest in Europe. So, of course, there are some economic hopes, but I would say maybe more interesting are the geopolitical hopes which are raised by the political elites in the countries. Suddenly, the issue of shale gas has become one of the major topics of presidential debate in Poland. We are between two electoral, we have one round of elections. Now in 2 weeks we'll have another round. And there was a very important, this shale gas was a very important part of debate, and this is very interesting to see how this, I would say, ideological or technical issues are part of the debate. Because of that, many people started to look at internet, learn, read, and very quick learning process of the society about techniques, how to drill, what will be the effects, and not only among the elites, but also, normal people started to demand information, conferences, more information. In the terms of geopolitics, as we know, Europe, geopolitical aspect of energy policy is becoming more and more important for Europe. Not only because we are more and more dependent on external sources, but because we are not sure how these sources may behave politically in the future, let's say. Because we already had 2 or 3 conflictful issues with Russia's supply of gas. And this has changed our European point of view on the security issues. So in the new report of European Commission on Future Strategy, the geopolitical issues are having more and more weight than they had before. Because of that, shale gas is very strongly perceived in that respect. In Poland, for example, during the political debate, if you would question anything about shale gas, you will be unpatriotic, willing to cooperate with Russia and willing to subdue to Russia. So if one of the candidates made a mistake or said something about environmental concerns, he was already accused by the right-wing candidate in the right-wing party of being, unpatriotic. So our foreign minister is talking about Poland as a future Norway, hoping that not only we will be rich, but independent from external sources of gas. Let's hope that this will be the case, but still there are, as I said, too many unknown things, so maybe it's too dangerous to raise two big hopes. The interesting thing is that we will know how big are the sources of shale gas in Poland in the future, but already this debate and hopes are shaping our politics of today. For example, Poland was negotiating with the Gazprom the agreement on the supply of gas for the next 20-30 years. And in the middle of these negotiations, of course, opposition parties started to say, why are you signing an agreement with Russia for next 20 or 30 years on such a high price if we have probably our own internal gas supply? So this is once again became a debate. So we see how the hopes for future are shaping today's policies, because this the signing of the Gazprom agreement has been stopped, or there are some unknown question marks going around it. So we have hopes in the regions, we have hopes in the countries, but also I think Europe is having hopes, thinking about, as you said, about different energy mix and the diversification of energy sources. What is more important, I would say, we forget that there are shale gas resources, as the geologists are saying, and as Mr. Prezzorelli said, in Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries. If this will be the case, then not only Poland will be more independent, but these post-Soviet countries will really gain their new breath. They will have economic resources, but also they are the ones who will be more independent for Russia, because they are the ones who are most threatened by dependence from Russia, as we saw in Belarus, Ukraine. Of course, if the American companies will enter to Lublin and Polish east border regions, they will very quickly start working, if they are not already working, on our east. So I think this gas shale will have important impact on geography of our energy policy. So I very much welcome what you said about Europe investing more in research, because as I said, there are too many questions unanswered. So I think Europe needs some strategy, European strategy, in that respect. Maybe not right now, in this moment where we still don't know what's going on, when there are too many unanswered questions, but definitely I think we need more research. We will need to include these unconventional gas resources in our future energy plans and strategies. I even would say that maybe we should include it in the report we are working now today, because the Americans are having the technologies. The American companies are coming and investing. Maybe we need more European approach to this topic as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stefan Zinger from WWF, could I ask you to come in? And could you maybe keep your remarks fairly short, because I do want to take advantage of Philip being here, and then we'll come back to you later on in the panel discussion. Is that okay?
Yeah, I try to stay in the remit of the other speakers to some extent, and I understand your concern. Thanks for inviting me, and just let me start with all respect to my colleague. I think I know that a certain oil company is sponsoring this event. It's fine. I think we're not there to call it shale gas. Let's call it shale gas. Huh? Hans, I think you understand me on that one. I think we're not there yet. That is all that belongs to you. Three basic points here where WWF is coming from on that issue. We have major concerns on shale gas. The first one is the long term, which has been raised already by our speaker in the beginning, the long-term lock-in on carbon. We know that definitely natural gas is a low-carbon fuel, has about half the emissions per unit energy as coal. That's fine, but still we need to remind ourselves that there's a European Council conclusion from October last year to say that by 2050, the industrialized countries, and I think Europe belongs to them, have to reduce their emissions by 80 to 95% by 2050. So I think how much gas are we putting in the system? There's a complete or I would say it's a complete mismatch between supply policy on one side, and I focus on gas here, and the other folks who work on climate policy, who work on energy efficiency and renewables. We have Nord Stream coming online, we have South Stream, we have Nabucco, we may have stranded investments or increased natural gas with LNG facilities, which are now being supplied with all the stuff which was meant for the US. And this, while facing decreased gas prices because of the decoupling of the oil and gas prices, because of the shale gas development in the US. So we have probably an oversupply of gas, which may screw up, I think, the long-term carbon targets, which I think we need to keep in mind because we do not want another lock-in on gas while we try to avoid a lock-in on coal. Let's keep that in mind. How much supply do we need in Europe? We have approaches on CCS coal, on CCS gas. We have approaches on conventional gas. We have some countries working on nuclear. We have, of course, renewable targets. And we have coming in increasingly not only unconventional gas, but also, unfortunately, unconventional fuels. It's a matter of time, unfortunately, where I see on the horizon coal to liquids coming in or increased exploration of methane hydrates, where a couple of countries, the Mexicans, the US, and the Chinese are working on that one. And I think that will screw up our approach on decent, sustainable energy development towards a climate benign future. So I think we have to call it close, I think. Second point is on shale gas per se. What we know from the US is that shale gas exploration, although based on the carbon footprint, it's comparably similar to conventional natural gas. In that respect, it may help to replace coal, that's fine. But we have other environmental penalties which are heavy. It's a water penalty. Freshwater consumption is huge. You can only afford that where you have sufficient freshwater resources. Go with that one to China and India and you'll be dead on arrival. It's not possible with that kind of water consumption. Second, there are quite aggressive composite mixes of chemicals required, where I doubt they would be consistent and in compliance with EU legislation on environmental safeguards. I have my doubts. Certainly, shale gas is different from conventional gas as what we know so far. There's some research on the way. It's quite land intensive. It's not just drilling a hole somewhere and having a big balloon, which you then take the gas out. It's flat on the ground to some extent, where you need lots of land. Poland, as you said correctly, what I heard from Poland, from our colleagues who work on R&D and research on that area, they're very concerned because you would basically make lots of agricultural land uninhabitable and unfertile. You make that land, you take that land out of food production, for instance. Let's keep that in mind. So, third point, isn't there a hype on unconventional gas to be available, so to speak, overnight as a kind of costly supply option for Europe? Let's look again at the case of the US. It started in 1999, 98, and then I would say the oil interests, some would say the oil mafia, took over the White House. The interests of Houston basically dominated the Bush policy on that one. There were tens of billions of dollars going to gas and oil industries to look for R&D to make shale gas and unconventional oil available in the interest of so-called freedom fuels, which in the US context was everything but oil from the Saudi region. That was the driver for them. Lots of billions of dollars. I don't have the number here, it was about 95 billion US dollars which went to the oil companies, to R&D to make that happen. They succeeded. They made it happen. How much money do we need in Europe to make it happen? I don't think the American companies will give us the technologies for free. Let's keep that in mind. That doesn't come for free. It doesn't come overnight. There's lots of money involved. I think we need to keep that in mind, and I close here in that context. We're very concerned about shale gas, and at this point in time, we say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. To take maximum advantage of Philip's remaining minutes with us, maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions if you have specific questions for Philip and he could maybe answer them together. I'm hoping that we will here in the grey jacket. There's a microphone. If you could just identify yourself as well, please.
My name is Jeff Seisler from Clean Fuels Consulting. All energy forms, whether they're alternative fuels or unconventional fuels, depend upon the price of a barrel of oil. We know, generally speaking, that alternative fuels like solar, some of the renewables, natural gas, LPG as vehicle fuels, etc., today are about 90 to 100 US dollars a barrel. What price of a barrel of oil is unconventional gas economic?
Okay.
Also considering the environmental compliance.
Okay. I think we had another one. Do you have another question? Okay. Well, Philip, why don't you?
Seriously,
what do you answer
that
that
is
simple question?
that simple question, as you know, cannot be answered simply because I mean the scenarios which we're looking at for 2050, we're going from 85. We're taking it as a base something like $85 up to $125. We have scenarios lower than that. At that level, some of our renewables don't necessarily look as if they can, at the moment, be commercially viable without continued support. Now, unconventional gas, I mean, Stefan said more or less in more passionate terms what I said in rather bureaucratic terms, that there are plenty of challenges ahead. And, well, I'm not sure we need to be the world and decide on behalf of the world whether one capacity here should be developed rather than another capacity should be developed. But certainly, if there is to be development of unconventional gas in Europe, that has a direct effect on communities, on land use, on soil, here in Europe. It may, however, and that's why I say I think you have to leave the door open for commercial investment. It may, however, provide, under certain cost conditions, a good alternative. And let's face it, no one's actually saying that there will be no gas used in the system between now and 2050. I think that a number of us would prefer scenarios in which there was entirely renewables in 2050. But even with renewables, we're well aware of the need to provide some balancing because of the intermittent supply coming from renewable sources of energy. Now that can be avoided if we create a big enough infrastructure in Europe which interconnects everyone and removes the need for generation capacity based upon fuels which can be started up very quickly. But I'm not absolutely clear yet, but that's going to be one of the subjects of our action plan, our infrastructure package, to what extent Europe is going to be able to afford all that interconnection straight away. So we probably have to be a bit more realistic about what's going to happen in different parts of the European Union and not take too absolutist approach. All I'm saying, however, is that I don't see why public money needs to be put into the investment in unconventional gas. If there is a case for it, and if it can be proved that the environment is not going to be damaged in the way that I think Stefan and others say legitimately, quite rightly now, there is a question mark over it, well, someone's got to show us that those impacts can be dealt with effectively. But if in the end the price of the gas offered from this source with those assurances is lower than the price of gas from Australia or Qatar, then if we've got to use any gas in the system, at least for security of supply reasons, one might prefer European gas to someone else's gas. And in relation to the price of the oil, I agree there is, in the energy balance in the market as a whole, necessarily a strong link between gas and oil. But there is not an automatic link of one price to the price of gas. There is gas-to-gas competition globally and in Europe now. And by the way, that's happened because of the development of LNG. So there is a small prospect that this could develop in a way which makes it cost-effective, makes it environmentally friendly, and makes it therefore attractive to use it from security of supply reasons. But that's a lot of questions to ask, and we have to be very cautious about it. All I would say that at the moment we're very skeptical about the idea of any public money going into it.
Can I just add on a very quick question about public money, Philip, if I may abuse my position?
Yeah.
You talked about the Strategic Energy Action Plan and infrastructure. Do you think there will be, or will you be making a case for more use of funds from the EU budget to close these gaps in the interconnector system? I mean, will we see a shift towards energy infrastructure funding in the EU budget as a new sort of strategic priority? We have the debate starting at the end of the year.
Well, we're going to make a case for why it's important for Europe to have strong, not every interconnection, but some key interconnections to integrate offshore, to combine different areas of generation and different areas of consumption to optimize the use of energy in Europe and to make our industries cost competitive. That requires money. Now, the question is how to generate the money to do it. Well, normally speaking, if you buy a product and it has to be transported, the user pays for that. We've got into a situation at the moment in Europe where it's not clear who is paying for infrastructure. In principle, we don't even know when we get a bill how much is energy and how much is transit, and how much is the meter we pay for, by the way. It would be a great advance if we could get to that point. But what we want to make it clear is that we've got to make more transparent the fact that in every tariff there should be a component of contribution to infrastructure development. Now, it could be that in the longer term, sorry, not in the longer term, but in the medium term, some projects of crucial importance to Europe won't go ahead without some degree of impetus from public sources. And that could be through borrowings, guarantees on the public side to finance some degree of transitional equity capital. But we've got to make the case for it. We've got to actually quantify for our heads of state in Europe what difference that would make. And I am on a vow of silence vis-à-vis all my colleagues in the rest of the Commission about how much of the community budget, European budget, should be spent on energy. We're going to come back to that in 2011. The first of all is, what's the cost to Europe of not doing this in terms of competitiveness and security of supply, and in terms of getting to a significant amount of renewable energy in our systems, including eventually the use of CCS to make certain categories of production viable from a carbon emissions point of view. And when we've made that case, then we can talk about the money. But for the moment, all we're talking about is rather vague figures, and we've got to get there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Philip.